Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Gittin. This is our 10th class, and we're going to be reviewing Daf 65 to Daf 71, and we're continuing to talk about agency, about shaliach, about an agent that was sent. So the Mishnah on the top of Daf 65 tells us that if a young girl, meaning under 12, sends an agent to accept her get, she isn't divorced till she gets the get in her hands, because she isn't old enough to make an agent to accept the get. And therefore, he could bring it to her, but she's not divorced till she gets it in her hand. Therefore, the husband can retract the get till she gets it in her hand. Her father can make an agent to accept it for his daughter. Therefore, when the agent gets the get, so then the husband cannot retract it. If the husband tells the agent, give this get to my wife in this city, right? So go to New York and give the get to my wife. And let's say the agent gives it to her in another place, right? In Philadelphia. So then the get is invalid because part of the agency was where the get should be given. However, if he says, I want you to give my wife a get, she's generally, she lives in New York. So then he can give it to her anywhere, because he wasn't saying give it in New York. He was saying give it to her wherever you find her. Let me tell you where to find her. The same with the woman sending an agent to accept the get. The same thing. If she says, go to New York to accept my get, so then if he meets the agent somewhere else, it's invalid. Or maybe it is valid, like depending on how it works. Hold on. Zohar is saying she can't see me or hear me. Aliza, you hear me and see me? Okay. Leah, do you?
I hear you and see you, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, Zohar. So, sorry. Maybe restart and see if it'll work for you. Okay, let's continue. If, again, right, if the wife says, bring me my get from this place, so then again, it doesn't matter where she finds the agent. Okay, so the Gemara explains when it's the husband, so he chooses the conditions of the divorce, but and therefore it would be valid or invalid depending on what he says. But for the woman, she can be divorced against her will. Therefore, the place is just telling, right? She's just telling the agent where the husband can be found. It's not a condition for her divorce. And therefore, if the agent finds the husband somewhere else, the get is still valid. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us if a Cohen's wife sent an agent to bring the get, so then she can eat Teruma till she gets the get. Now, just to remind us, this woman is Yisrael, meaning she's a regular Jewess. She's married to a Cohen. If you're married to a Cohen, so then you can eat Truma. If you remember, Truma are part of the gifts, part of the tithes, Trumot and Masrot, that are given to the Cohen. They have a certain amount of sanctity. That means that only Kohanim, only priests, can eat from Truma. And not only that, but the wife of a Kohen, obviously the children of the Kohen, because they're also Kohanim, and the slaves of the Kohen can eat from Truma. Now, let's say she's getting divorced. As soon as she's divorced, she can no longer eat from the Truma. So this Mishnah is explaining when is she considered divorced. So if she says to the agent, bring me my get, so that means that she's not divorced till she gets the get in her hand. If she says, accept the get for me, so then she stops eating truma immediately, because as soon as he leaves, we don't know when he met the husband, and therefore she stops eating truma immediately. If she says, accept my get, again, in this place, right? Again, in New York, so then she can eat her truma till the amount of time it would take for him to get to New York, right? So if you know he's getting on a plane and it's going to take him 10 hours to get there, so then she can eat truma for those 10 hours as soon as he lands, right? We don't know if maybe he met him at the airport. So then she needs to stop eating truma. Or maybe it doesn't go according to him getting to the place. As soon as he leaves, she cannot eat truma anymore. Those are the two opinions. So the Gemara explains, again, she really means, she really means get the get wherever my husband is, as we explained before. She can also stipulate that she doesn't want the get to go into effect till he reaches a certain city, right? So again, even if he gets the get beforehand, if she stipulates that it is not a valid get till he gets to New York, so then it works. Rabbi Eliezer says she can't eat truma right away, because even if he went in the wrong direction, maybe he met the husband somewhere else, right? You never know. People travel, they bump into each other, and therefore she can't eat truma till as soon as he leaves. If a person told an agent to make an eruv for him, so this is going to be good review from a long time ago, Masachet Eruvin. If you remember, we said that in order to either permit walking around, it depends what type of eruv we're making here. Here, this is for tchumin, meaning if someone wants to walk a large distance, you put some food at the end of the city limit, and then you get an extra 2,000 amot. So let's say the person told an agent to put the eruv there, and then let's say he put the wrong food, right? You said put figs, and he put dates. So now it's a machloket if that is a valid eruv or not. Meaning, on one hand, he listened to you. On the other hand, he didn't listen to you. So again, how important are those details? So when the wife sent an agent to the city, she was particular about that city. Again, like the man was particular about dates or figs, or she just said, as we said before, my husband lives over there. That's where he's probably going to be. And again, let's say the agent put the right food, but in the wrong place. Is it valid or not? Again, all of these are questions on agency. In Hebrew, we say shlichut, right? Did the shaliach, did the agent do his shlichut, do his agency or not? The next Mishnah, if a husband says, write and give a get to my wife, so then that's valid. If he says, release her, or some other words that don't say write and give the get, so then it's not valid, right? He has to be very clear on the words that he uses. The next Mishnah says, originally, if a man was led out to be executed, and as he's going to his execution, he says, write my wife a get. So we listen to him and we give her the get, even though he didn't say give it, but we assume when he said write it, he meant also give it. And okay, then later on they said, even if a husband was going on a long journey, or if he was very ill and he said these words, we also listen to him. So the Gemara on Daf 66 explains that there was this story of a person who was going out to be executed, and he told people to give money from wine to Rav Avina, and then he gets the money So the story, they tell us that he gets the money even if he didn't do an act of acquiring it. So it's similar to the man being executed and saying, "Give the get to write the get for my wife." But here, the Gemara says that, well, maybe this is different. He's going to get killed. That's why it's valid, as opposed to somebody who is dying. You would maybe need to do some sort of acquisition, a kinyan. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us, let's say someone was thrown into a pit and he calls up, right? Write a get for my wife. So we write it and we give it. So the Gemara says, well, maybe he's a demon. How do you know that it's not? How do you know it's really a person? Right, maybe you shouldn't believe him. We say, no, we can see that he's a person. How do you know he's a person? Well, he has a shadow. The Gemara says, well, demons also might have shadows. So, well, he has a shadow of a shadow. I don't know exactly what that means. It's like the sun in a certain angle, but apparently people can have a shadow of a shadow, but a demon cannot. And don't worry, we're going to be talking about demons soon, but not yet. Or another option is maybe it was the co-wife, right? She disguises her voice. This is Joseph, give my wife a get, right? But it's really the co-wife. And we say, no, we still believe him. And again, it seems that this is a time of danger. And we said, like, you write the get and you give it to the wife. Next Mishnah. Let's say a healthy person says, write a get for my wife. So then so now he didn't write it. Wait 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry. A healthy person says write a get. We don't write it and give it because he didn't say give it. So we don't listen to him just yet. Let's say a man did this. He said write a get, and then he fell off of the roof. Now, again, I think like fascinatingly, the Gemara says if he purposely fell off the roof, so then this was his way of preparing, and therefore we write the get and we give it to the wife because he had already said it from before. If he really fell and it was an accident, so then it's not valid and we do not write the get. The Gemara explains that the end proves the intention of the beginning, right? Did he really mean it or did he not really mean it? When he said write it, right, he meant also give it if he kills himself. But if he doesn't, so then maybe he didn't mean it. There's a story of a man who saw a father and a son learning, and he told them to write a get for him because he was going on a long journey, and then the father did. And then sorry. And he said to the father and son, write the get. And then the father died, right? So these two people who are supposed to write the get. So the question is the son considered an agent of the husband or not? Because the husband said it to both. So the Gemara says, yes, the son can now write the get. He is seen as the agent of the husband. Okay, the next Mishnah says that let's say two people are told, give a get to my wife. They do not have the ability to appoint others to be witnesses. They need to do it themselves. If he tells three people, write and give a get, so then the three write it and they give it. Let's say he told three people, give a get to my wife. So the difference is write and give or just give. So if he told three people to give a get to his wife, so then the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, because it's three people, so now two people are witnesses, but three people is a court, a beit din. So when he tells three people to give it, so now they have the capacity as a court to appoint another person to write it, as opposed to a regular person does not have that ability. Rabbi Akiva actually from jail said the same thing. or maybe they have to write it and they cannot appoint other people, right? Are they seen as a court or not? Let's say the husband told 10 people to write the get. So now one person writes and 2 people sign it. If he says, all of you need to write and give the get, right? Kulchem, all of you. So then they all have to have it written. They all have to sign it. And if one of them dies, it's invalid because it invalidates the get. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain. Right, again, as we said, right, can the 2 people, let's say he told 2 people, can the 2 people tell the scribe to write the get and then they'll sign it? So if the Gemara says no, because again, as we mentioned, an agent cannot make another agent, right? A shaliach cannot make another shaliach, meaning the husband can tell somebody to write and can tell somebody to sign it, but he can't tell somebody who then tells somebody else. That doesn't work. And then the question is, when he says give a get, does it mean write and give, or does it mean tell somebody else to write it and you sign it, right? That's the machloket. Okay, Daf 67. Maybe another opinion is, even if the man was told to get someone else to write it and then they sign it, we don't do this because maybe the scribe, the sofer, will feel upset that you didn't ask him to sign it, and that's not what he would have wanted, and therefore it doesn't work. Or another option is actually it is valid. And as we mentioned before, words cannot be transferred from one agent to another. And the law is according to Rabbi Yossi because it is the most reliable. Okay, the Gemara, and here the Gemara actually describes different types of wisdom of many of the sages. So it goes through different stages, and each rabbi, his wisdom is likened to a different like idea or concept. So somebody is like a well-stocked store, right? They have everything, all the knowledge, or the most organized, or like Rabbi Eliezer is kav v'naki. That means he knows, his knowledge isn't expansive, but what he knows is perfect. And it goes through different stages. So like, if that's interesting, I definitely, I think that you should look at it on Daf 67. It's a very nice passage. Okay, continuing on Daf 67, a person can tell an agent to tell someone else to write the get, and that 2 other people should be the witnesses. But really, you shouldn't do this because we're afraid that maybe the wife will tell somebody else, right? Maybe she'll hire and pretend that she's the husband, and therefore this is actually very dangerous. Let's say the person says, tell someone to write it, but you sign it. So the Gemara says, again, it's valid, but you shouldn't do it. Or maybe it can be done. And as I said before, if you tell 10 people to write and give, 1 writes and 2 sign. If he says all of you, all of them have to write it and sign it. Okay, and with that, we finish the 6th chapter. Okay, let's continue on Daf 67. The new chapter moves on from the concept of agents, and now is going to talk about the husband's mental or physical state that he would be allowed to give the get. So the Mishnah tells us, let's say a person has something called kordaikus, where for a certain amount of time, the person is incapacitated. It seems, some say it's like a seizure, but he's incapacitated. And let's say he says, write a get in that state. So then it's invalid because he is not in his normal physical and mental state. Let's say first he said, write a get when he was sane, and then he had this seizure or something. And then while he was in that state, he said, no, 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 don't write it. I love my wife. We don't listen to the second statement, and we go according to the first statement, which was when he was sane, he said, I want to divorce my wife. Let's say a person loses speech. And I think, again, like as I'm saying, like it's very advanced in terms of their knowledge, right? So let's say this is a person who has a stroke, chas v'shalom, right? So they have mental capacity. They don't have a way to communicate. So you ask him if he wants you to write the get and give it. And if he nods, so then you ask him different questions to see if nodding means yes, and we'll see in the Gemara, shaking his head means no. And if if you see that he can communicate, even though it's nonverbal, so then the get is valid. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain this. What is this for daikus? It seems that it's someone who drank too much new wine, like fresh wine, and a demon takes over him. Told you the demons are coming back. And here, since we're talking about this illness or this issue, so the Gemara gives different ways to heal this. If anybody is into herbal medicine or Chinese medicine, so there's a lot in the next following dapim. We're going to see in a few minutes. The Gemara goes through many different illnesses and how to cure them. Some of them are boil some herbs. Others are a little bit more extreme, like shave half of the head and put a chicken on top, and then the blood runs down, and then you go into the water. We'll see some of those things. Okay, so this one is right. There are different ways to heal a fever, and again, like drink water, eat lean meat, and then again the chicken on the head and the blood, and then you eat leeks. And anyway, it's quite complicated. And if you're interested in this, it is on Daf 67. There's a story about Rav Amram Chasida, who was tortured by the house of the Reish Galuta. Again, the Reish Galuta is the political leader in Bavel, and the servants were really terrible to him, and they tell the whole story of what happened. They tried to, and then Yalta comes. She's the daughter of the Reish Galuta, and she helps him. There's another story of the servants of the Reish Galuta, how they were terrible to Rav Sheshet. It seems that there was always like a power struggle. It seems, though, the Gemara seems to say that it's the servants, not necessarily the leader himself, but the servants. There seems to be a tension between the religious leaders and the political leaders. So I guess this has been happening for 2,000 years. But the servants of the Reish Galuta were terrible to Rav Sheshet. They tried to feed him things that weren't kosher, and Rav Sheshet was blind, and they tried to like give him meat with bones in it so he would choke, but he was smart, so he saved himself. And then they also, at the top of Daf 68, they tried to actually trap him, like they dug a hole and they put a blanket over it, and they're like, just walk straight. But he figured out that there was a trap, and he went around it. And since we mentioned demons, so we're going to have some famous stories about demons. There are, you should just know that there are male and female demons, and Shlomo HaMelech provided demons. He actually was able to capture the demons. What happened? If you remember, we learned that the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, was made out of stone. But God said that you weren't allowed to chisel, to use metal in order to hew the stones. So instead, if you remember, we learned about the worm or the creature called the shamir. So the shamir was a worm that would cut the stones. So Shlomo needed to find the shamir, and basically the Gemara explains that he needed to. The way to find the shamir was to ask the king of the demons. His name is Ashmadai. So he was the king of the demons. So Shlomo sent his general to trap Ashmadai, and the Gemara is very vivid in describing how they trap him. He had this like pool of water that was like sealed, and basically the general, it was like in the side of a mountain, so the general drained it from like inside the earth, and then filled it up from the top with wine, and then stopped up the bottom and the top. And then when Ashmadai opened it up, he saw that there was wine, and he said, "Oh, this is definitely a trap, so I'm not going to drink it." But then he got really thirsty, so he drank it, and then he got drunk, and then the general tied him up with a chain with the name of God. And then the Gemara describes strange things that Ashmadai does on the way to Jerusalem. He helps a blind person and a drunk person, and he laughs at this guy and the other guy. The Gemara is going to explain each thing. And then when he gets to the castle, Shlomo, the king, does not see him for 3 days. And then finally, which made Ashmadai mad, and finally when Shlomo asked him where the shamir is, he said he didn't know where it was, that it was actually given to the duchifat. Duchifat is actually the national bird of Israel. It's called the hoopoe bird. Hoopoe. Duchifat, you can Google it. It actually has like a, I don't know what it's called, on the like a crown on the top of its head. So this duchifat, actually, my son was in a army unit that was called duchifat, which is kind of cool. Anyway, the shamir was given to the duchifat to watch. I guess it was very smart or protective. So then they needed to get this shamir. So what were they going to do? So they went and they found the nest of the duchifat. So they covered the nest. Right, I mean, it's not, I don't want to say it's not a nice story, but they needed the shamir. But they went to the nest where the baby chicks were inside, and then they covered it with a piece of glass. So then when the mother came, it couldn't get through the glass to get to its babies, but it was really smart. So then the mother bird brings the shamir to pierce through the glass so that she can get to the babies. And then they scare the mother bird away and they take the shamir, and it actually ends tragically because the bird is so upset that it couldn't do what it swore that it would do, and the bird kills itself. So I'm sorry for the bird, but that's how they got the shamir. Okay, so that's one story. We'll get back to it. Now the Gemara says, why was the king of the demons, why did he do these strange things on the way to Jerusalem? So it seems that the blind person, so they ask him, like, why did you do this? So he explains each thing, that the blind person was actually a righteous person, so Ashmadai helped him. Again, this is interesting to try to think about, what does the word demon mean in Judaism, right? Like, it's not something that's coming to, kill people, or, right? I think here, actually, the Gemara is trying to show, I think, some sort of sensitivity. I think it's interesting. So anyway, you could think about that. I think there's a lot of depth here that, again, I'm not so clear exactly what the Gemara means here. Why did he laugh at the drunk person? So Ashmadai explains that the drunk person was actually an evil person, right? Like, he knew, like, he has this connection, and he could see into their soul, maybe. So he knew that really he was evil, this drunk person, and therefore he was happy. So he helped him so that he would get all of his merits in this world, and then none in the next world. He cried at a wedding because he knew, again, like he knows the future. He knew that the husband would die soon and that the wife would have to wait 13 years to do yibum with the brother. So again, we see some sensitivity here. He laughs at a man who asks the shoemaker for shoes that will last 7 years. Why does he laugh? Because he knows that this person is going to die actually within the week. So he laughs that he wants to get, the best type of shoes, even though he's not really going to need it. I don't think it's so funny, but okay. He also laughs. This one is actually funny. He laughs at a sorcerer who's doing all these magic tricks because he says that the sorcerer doesn't even realize that he's sitting on a pile of treasure. He thinks he's so smart, but not so smart. Okay, let's go back to King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, and Ashmedai, the king of the demons. So the Gemara tells us that Shlomo kept Ashmedai the whole time that he built the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. Right, it says there's a verse that says God rules over demons. So Shlomo asked him how demons are greater than people. So Ashmedai kind of tricks Shlomo. Again, if you remember, Shlomo is very wise, but he tricks Shlomo to basically set him free, to untie him, and then he throws Shlomo HaMelech very far away, and then Shlomo needs to wander back as a beggar. It's kind of like maybe is it the Prince and the Pauper? I remember that, right, where they like switch places. So basically, Ashmedai takes on the form of Shlomo, and he takes over the kingdom. Shlomo HaMelech is meant to he becomes this pauper, and he's making his way back to Jerusalem. And when he gets back to Jerusalem, he's like, it's me. And of course, it's really hard. They don't believe him. And then they say, well, did you check that king's feet? Because it's important to know that demons have chicken feet. So they say, did you check his feet? And they're like, oh, actually, he's been wearing socks the whole time. So we haven't seen his feet. So they realize that Shlomo, that the other guy is Ashmedai. They give Shlomo his ring with God's name on it and the chain with God's name in it. And Ashmedai basically flies away. But it seems, says the Gemara, that Shlomo was afraid for the rest of his life. Like this was pretty traumatic for him, and it affected him for the rest of his life, at least in the Gemara. Okay, now we're going to go for at least a daf and a half. All of 69 and half of 70 are remedies for different illnesses. So I didn't write them all down because there was a lot and it's very intricate. But what I will say is, I think it's just fascinating to see on one hand, how things haven't changed, meaning people are still suffering from the same illnesses, meaning, again, you could call it different things, but headaches, fever, cold, intestinal issues. So that's number one. Number two is, it is very interesting. Someone in my study group actually did her postdoc in Sloan Kettering, and they were working on new, like drug treatments. And they did go to, kind of herbal medicine to see what the chemical properties were and help them with, kind of making new drugs. So it is interesting. On one hand, some of these things are very vivid. So I would definitely say do not try these at home. On the other hand, it is just interesting. So there are remedies for headaches. Again, some of them are herbal. Some of them are you have to kill a chicken and then the blood drips on certain things. There are other remedies for eye illnesses, for night blindness, for day blindness. It involves eating animal spleens. There's remedy for nosebleeds. You have to write a specific verse backwards. You burn the wicks of wool in your nostril. That sounds like cauterizing, so that's interesting. There's bleeding from the mouth. Maybe it's blood from the liver or the lungs, and there are remedies for all of these things. A remedy for toothaches, you should use garlic cloves. There are issues with a lung infection or heart pain, a weak heart, a heavy heart. You have to soak bread in honey. Intestinal pains, worms. It's really just like on and on. If you have diarrhea, you should drink chamomile in water. If you have an infection of your spleen, then you should take the spleen of a goat and you dry it out in the oven, and then maybe just drink a lot of wine, or no, you have to eat a good breakfast. If you have hemorrhoids, you put certain herbs in that area. If you have like hip pain or bladder stone, like kidney stones, fever. This was interesting, right? If you have a fever, then you should sit. You should sit between boiled date pits and leaves of the Ader tree, and that's going to help with your fever. Daf 70 continues with other remedies for like skin issues, oil from roasted wheat. They might also work for leprosy. Here it seems to be like real leprosy, not like the spiritual leprosy. Okay, so that was remedies. Now the Gemara moves on to advice on like health advice. So there are certain conditions that that can be caused by someone doing something dangerous, right? So or there are things that can prolong your life even though you're going to die, right? So if you swallow a bee or a hornet, you're going to die. But if you drink vinegar, so then it'll give you enough time so that you can get all your affairs in order, and then you'll die. Or if you eat beef and turnips in the summer months, that's very dangerous. Also, overeating is very dangerous. If you have too many dates, it's going to lead to an illness. It leads to fire in your bones, which is just interesting. I mean, it's all interesting, but how do you heal this person if they eat lentils and aged wine and then they like sweat it out? So then that will heal them. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, told Rabbi Natan, what's the best way to stay healthy? If you eat a third of your stomach's capacity, drink a third of your stomach's capacity, and then leave the rest. Meaning you shouldn't eat till you're completely full. It is not healthy. For good health, you should dip your bread in wine or vinegar. Again, you shouldn't overeat, and you shouldn't delay using the bathroom. If you remember, we learned a lot of this in Masechet Brachot, the importance of relieving oneself whenever you can. Okay, it's not healthy. Oh, now we're going to have a few things. Okay, so it's not healthy to do bloodletting and then to have relations right afterwards. It's going to lead to weak children. But if you eat food after you did bloodletting, so then it is okay to have relations afterwards. So it is interesting that they understand that these things weaken the body. After using the bathroom, you should also wait a little bit before having relations, because there's a demon that follows you back from the bathroom. So you should wait a little bit and then you can have relations. The Gemara actually gives a remedy for a man who is impotent. Again, things that people have been dealing with for thousands of years. The Gemara gives certain remedies of what to do. The Gemara says that there are three things that weaken a person. Again, I think this is like fascinating, just in terms of the insight. What are three things that weaken a person? Anxiety, travel, if you travel too much, and sin. And the Gemara talks about how there are verses that support all of these things, that when one is focused on one of these three things, it leads to a weakness of the person. It's harmful to eat standing up or drink standing up. How many of our mothers told us to sit down while we eat or drink because it's not healthy? So I guess they got it from this Gemara. The Gemara also says it's not healthy to have relations standing up. The Gemara says that there are 8 things that are good in moderation, but not too much. Travel is good in moderation. Having relations, being wealthy, again, good in moderation, not too much. Labor, right, being active, drinking wine, sleeping, warm water. So either it means drinking warm water or bathing in warm water, and bloodletting. So like all these things are good to do, but not to do too much. Okay, that's the end of our health advice for today. We are going back to writing a get. Okay, so we are on daf 70. And the Gemara tells us that if a person said to write the get and then became, again, incapacitated with this, let's say, seizure, and then he says, don't write it. So Reish Lakish says, you can write it even while the person is having a seizure, because you'll see in a second. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you have to wait till the seizure is over. You have to ask him when he's completely sane, ask him if what he still wants to do, and then you can do it. So the Gemara explains why are there these different opinions. Reish Lakish says you can do it while he's in this episode because he sees him like he's sleeping, meaning he's not insane, but it's as if he's sleeping. At this moment, he can't give the get, but really he could. And therefore you can write it. Rabbi Yochanan sees him like a shoteh, like someone who's insane. Not that he is, but he's like somebody who's insane. And that person cannot give a get in that moment. You have to wait till it passes, and then you can give the get. From here, the Gemara talks about a mortally wounded person. They actually talk about a person whose neck is severed, not decapitated, but very severed. So if this person says, I don't know how he's saying things, but okay, he signs, right? And he says, write and give a get to my wife. We listen to him because we see him as right now alive, but going to die in a few minutes. And just as an aside, if a person does this to another person, so then, and they did it inadvertently, b'shogeg, so then that person does not go to the Ir Miklat. I don't remember if we've learned this before. An Ir Miklat is a city of refuge. The city of refuge is where someone runs to if they kill somebody inadvertently. Here we say that if you cut someone's neck, even though you mortally wounded the person, they didn't die in that moment, and therefore you are not seen as an inadvertent murderer in the sense that you cannot go to the city of refuge. We said that if a person becomes mute, he can nod and say, like, give my wife a get. Again, we check his responses. So we ask him questions. We ask him 1, no question, and then 2, yes questions, right? So we mix it up to see if he knows how to say yes or no. Actually, my grandson just learned how to nod, and but it seems to be that he does it as hello. So he goes like this, right? So you have to check, right? Do you want this? Do you want this? Right? Is it hot outside? Is it cold outside? You check what it means. The Gemara says, what do you ask him? So interestingly, the Gemara says you ask him about seasonal fruit, because apparently everybody knows about seasonal fruit, which is fascinating because if you ask any Israeli child, they would know about seasonal fruit. But if you ask anybody in America, I don't think people know what seasonal fruit is. But here, every Israeli child knows that, you get oranges in the winter, you get watermelon in the summer, and you cannot get an orange in the summer, right? I think in America, we get everything we used to get everything all the time. So it's just fascinating that in the Gemara, right, they're very connected to the land. So they know what's in season. Okay, we're going to do tomorrow's daf as well. So tomorrow's daf is daf 71. So it tells us that if a deaf mute, okay, so now deaf mute, generally we see as doesn't have mental capacity because they don't have a way to communicate. But if this deaf mute can communicate by writing, so he can give a get, right? He can get somebody to give the get. Again, the mute that we mentioned before can nod, but the deaf mute needs to write it out. So that's just an interesting distinction. So the mute can be tested if he's competent, and then his, as we said, the get is valid, but also any of his business dealings are valid. He can also testify about a woman's husband's death. If you remember in Masechet Yevamot, we were very lenient as to who can testify about a woman's husband because we don't want her to be an aguna. Remember, a chained woman who cannot, right, doesn't know if her husband is alive or dead, and therefore she can't remarry. So we're going to let him testify about this, but not in general in a court. He can also reorder the division of his estate, so he does have some authority. Or we can only test the mute for metaltalin, for objects that are movable, but not a get. Or maybe we're talking about this is only for the deaf mute from birth. Again, if someone is a deaf mute from birth, we assume that they don't know how to communicate. But if he became deaf mute, so then we know he did have mental capacity. So then he can write the get and have other people sign it. Or maybe, right, even the deaf mute can divorce with signaling, maybe only for his wife, because again, if he's a deaf mute, so even his marriage is only rabbinic, de Rabbanan, it's not biblical because he doesn't have full mental capacity. But if he was married to his Yivama, right, Levirate marriage, if he marries the Yivama, that's a biblical marriage, and therefore signaling would not be enough. Okay, the Gemara, since we mentioned Yevamot, so the Gemara, just to remind you about Masechet Yevamot, so the Gemara gives one of the something that we learned before. Let's say you have two brothers who marry two sisters. Does that ring a bell? So let's say the two, if any two of them, meaning the two brothers or the two sisters or one brother and one sister, if any two of them are deaf mutes, so then they don't do chalitza or yibum, again, because the marriage is only rabbinic and not biblical. But if the wives were not sisters, they could do yibum, and then they can divorce them. Okay, if the woman became insane, so now the Gemara tells us that the husband is not allowed to divorce her, which again, I think is fascinating. The question is why? We'll see in a second. Let's say he became insane, the husband became insane or deaf mute. He also cannot divorce her here because he doesn't have the mental capacity. So the Gemara says, why can't the man divorce his insane wife? Because really he could, right? We don't need her to have mental capacity to get divorced, but this is a way to protect the woman, right? We don't want the man to quickly divorce her if she is incapacitated, and therefore the Gemara tells us that he is not allowed to divorce her. Okay, the last Mishnah for today, a get is only valid if the man told the scribe directly to write it and the witnesses to sign it. As we mentioned before, he cannot tell them through another agent. That doesn't work. The Gemara explains, or maybe the Mishnah is only if he said write it, but if he would tell the agent write it and give it, so then he can tell others to sign it and write it. This is only according to Rabbi Meir, who says that an agent can pass an agency to somebody else. The end of the Mishnah seems to be like Rabbi Yossi, or maybe it's all according to Rabbi Meir, or maybe it's all according to Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara goes through different ways we can understand the Mishnah, and the cases that the husband didn't tell the agent to appoint others, and therefore he can't. So I think with this, we are going to end. Maybe we have a few minutes so we can open it up if anybody has any questions. But two announcements. So first of all, I want to wish everyone a meaningful fast, right? Tomorrow night begins the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. So wishing everyone a meaningful fast and a Shabbat Shalom. And next week, we are going back to Wednesday nights, and hopefully it will stay Wednesday nights for a while. So I just wanted to let you know. So I'm going to turn off the recording, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to hear any questions.